All right, good morning. Welcome to the podcast. This is episode 9 of the Hockey Variety Podcast. New logo. Yes. Finally got around to changing the logo after 7 or 8 episodes following our rebrand. I finally changed the logo. Now today's going to be a bit of a quiet podcast. My fiance, she's sleeping because she worked a night shift, and she's an absolute champ. Seriously, just incredible work ethic. She's probably recruiter for my hockey team because, just great work ethic. But got kind of an interesting episode today. Trying to think outside the box here and do some stuff people haven't really done. So that's my goal here on the podcast. This is actually our 3 subscriber special. So this is going to be a very special episode. I know one of those subscribers is my burner account. So it's kind of like 2 subscribers. But, we're trying to hit 10 subscribers before the end of the year. And, you got to take what you can get, right? So, we're aiming to hit 10 subscribers. Really, we're trying to hit 9 subscribers, though, since one of them is, again, the burner account. But, yeah, I'm also hoping to have kind of the social media going as well today. I'm hoping to make my Facebook page for this podcast as well as an Instagram page. So if you are on either platforms, be sure to look out for those. And Saturday morning, trying to get 2 episodes out again this weekend. I'm starting to think about doing like a middle of the week one as well, just to space these out a bit. So, maybe the usual Sunday one and then one on like a Thursday or something. I don't know. Something like that. So we'll see. Stay tuned for that. But pretty exciting week in my life though. I'm gonna talk a little bit about my game in the city that I went to on Thursday. Yes, I actually made the drive, and it was a pretty good night. I'll talk about that in a bit though. I had a good workout this morning. I'm trying to lose a bit of weight. I'm not like fat or anything, but I just bought new pants and they fit good, but I want them to fit great. You know what I mean? So, I'm like, I go to the gym, I work out, try to put on muscle, how else am I going to dump guys in front of my net or in front of the net after they pick at my goalie, right? I have to be able to absolutely flatten guys. So, of course, I do the weight workouts and stuff, but, I ate pretty bad over the holidays, and I'm kind of paying for it now, so, trying to get the cardio going and all of that. Got to be in game shape as well. We got playoffs around the corner, late March, early April. I gotta be ready for that, so, yeah, because even in beer league, you need to have that conditioning, I think. I really do, because, what's the point of playing beer league if you don't want to win? I guess having fun is important, but you gotta win. It's so good winning. Let's I gotta show some appreciation for my team. Seriously, I love playing with these guys so much. So I went to my first game in probably about a month and a half this past Thursday. Right, the roads were great, weather was great. So I was like, you know what? I could use a grocery run in the city too. So I'll make the drive. I'll go to the late game in town. Yeah, I haven't seen my guys in about a month and a half here. Just been kind of doing the drop-in hockey here in town, right? I have to drive an hour to get to these games. And so I haven't been doing it a lot over the winter, obviously. And yeah, I did my groceries and all that. And it was just such a good feeling seeing the guys again. Seriously, it's just a really good feeling. You've been away from the team for a while, and you see your guys, and they're happy to see you, and it's a great feeling, really. Throughout my childhood and even into adulthood, and I don't really care about this too much now, but I definitely wasn't the most popular guy ever. I got some really good friends now, and I wouldn't trade that for the world, really. I'd rather have 5 or 6 really good friends than have 100 kind of friends, right? But going to the city and just showing up in my game and just being really appreciated. It's such a good feeling, really. And like, okay, I'm going to be hopefully not doxing myself too much here, but like my day job, I'm a teacher, right? And one of the things I teach is gym PE. It's kind of gotta be a bit sensitive sometimes. PE teachers are like, oh, it's not gym. Gym is the location, but it's like, whatever. It's gym class. Fight me. But you know what? One of the kind of lessons that my students do is kind of talking about sort of like the benefits of being active, and then like obviously the physical conditioning. That's the obvious one. And then, students are pretty good at knowing like the emotional side of things too. Like it helps regulate your mood when you're active. It might help you cheer up or whatever. And then there's also like the social side of things. And that usually throws off students when they get that question. It's like, oh, the social side? I don't know. Like, especially if they play individual sports. But like, I've been kind of cranky the last few weeks. I think I need to change my routine a bit. And going to this game Thursday night it is exactly what I needed. Seriously, like I've been in a much better mood since then. Honestly, like it was pretty much exactly what the doctor ordered to get me out of this funk, really. And it's just, I work from home, so I don't get to socialize too much. So being there with the guys, joking around, catching up on life, and then of course playing this amazing sport of ours, and playing games that matter too. Like the drop-in games in town here, it's fun, but it's not the same. I think anyone that plays rec hockey and drop-in hockey can understand where I'm coming from with that. So just so good seeing the guys. Seriously, I have to give them some love. And the game itself, we were playing the top team in our division, and we're kind of on the cusp of the playoffs right now. Like it's an 11-team division, and we need to finish either 5th or 6th to make the playoffs. I don't know. It depends on how they want to split things, because they do like the playoffs for the top teams, and then they do like the kind of crappy playoffs after. And since it's 11 teams, I don't know if they're going to go 5 and 6 or 6 and 5. Not really sure what they're planning on doing just yet for that. But either way, we want to finish at least 5th, because that way we're in no matter what, right? And we're kind of on the cusp right now. I think we're 5th last time I checked. We were playing the first place team on Thursday night. And I got to tell you, I don't like these guys at all, right? Like, they've got that like kind of arrogance to them too, kind of like how we did last season when we were kind of on top of the world there. It's kind of annoying being on the other side of things, I'm not going to lie. And we really don't like these guys. Seriously, there's a bunch of players on that team we don't like. They're very frustrating to play against. You can tell these guys have played together for a while too, because they always know where to put the pass and stuff. And on top of all of it, they have a really good goalie. And kudos to him. He had a good game. I wouldn't say he's like broken, like he needs to be in the next division higher or even above that. But, that guy's the MVP of his team. I mean, we put 4 goals past him, so he's obviously not like a crazy world beater, but he's a tough goalie to play against, that's for sure. And he's got a great set of pads. That matters. That really does matter. He's got the whole like Merzlikin kind of baby blue thing going on like he did last season. So like Merzlikin did last season. So yeah. But yeah, no, we hate playing against this team. There's one guy on their team we really don't like, and it's so funny. So this guy, we played against him a lot last season too, because he played in our division sometimes. Just a big complainer. He kind of looks like Lafreniere, and he plays like him too, if you know what I mean. So, just like super overhyped. Like seriously, every time we play against him, he's like, "Oh, look out for that guy. He's good," and I'm like, he's not that good, really. He's like maybe a bit better than me, and I'm not that good. So, I'm the worst player on my team. So, come on. And I haven't played against this guy in a while, and then, we get on the ice and I see he doesn't have a visor anymore, and he looks so funny because he doesn't have the face for no visor, right? Like if you're gonna rock no visor, you got to at least look kind of intimidating. You have to be kind like, we got a few guys on our team that don't do visor, but they got the face for it, right? And also, like, those guys have been doing no visor for a while, right? And when you go from visor to no visor, it's clearly just trying to be a tough guy. It seems like, at least in this example, So I just thought that was so funny, and we lost the game. We lost 6-4. It was a tough one. I hadn't played. Man, I was on -4 that game too. I was on defense, and I don't know. The first 2 goals against when I was on the ice too, that was like all me, just missing my assignment. We just hated that team. I'm surprised there wasn't more penalties because I don't know. I was ready to go. It was tough game, but it was so nice being around my guys again. And you know what? We're gonna get into playoffs, and that's all that matters because you just have to get in, and then you can start surprising some teams. We can beat every team in our division. We just gotta do it when it counts, and we have to get in. Like we have to be in the playoffs to be able to do that. So, want to give a big shout out to my guys. Seriously, I'm looking forward to winning another championship with these guys because we're gonna do it. We are gonna go all the way. I feel like sometimes they think maybe I'm a bit too positive, but it's beer league, man. Anything can happen. It's not like in the NHL where you have like these really good teams that are like world beaters. It's like, no, it's beer league. You can score 3 goals in 2 minutes. Like, quote unquote, magical stuff happens, I guess. I don't know. It's you can pull off an upset in beer league easily. I see it all the time. I think we win this championship. We're gonna do it. We are. We're gonna surprise some teams, and then, just climbing our way up the ranks here. So, yeah, there you go. Shout out to those guys. All right, something I've wanted to talk about for a while on the podcast now is if you're a UFA, like a UFA that's in demand, right? Like, I'm not talking about guys that are fringe NHL players or like RFAs that never got a qualifying offer, like guys that actually have options, okay? Guys who are going to make a pretty big chunk of change, but would be in demand by pretty much every team, let's say. I'll get into an example in a bit here. And those of you that have been listening to the podcast right from the start will know that I hate Canada. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I love Canada. I love living here. I even lived abroad and then came back simply because I love living in Canada so much. But if I was an NHL player, I don't think I'd like living in Canada. I don't. And I've said that on the podcast before, but it's just the markets. They're too overwhelming. You got to live your life, right? So I'll get to that. But when you're a UFA that's actually in demand, there's a lot of considerations on where you got to sign. And here's kind of my criteria. And there's more factors, of course, right? For example, wanting to play with certain players. Maybe a player played with one guy in junior and they want to be teammates again. There are other factors. Maybe they want to play for a certain coach or something like that. But I've got kind of 5 factors here that I want to go over in this podcast. So, and I will get to an example. This next section of the podcast is a bit of a 2-parter, and I'm just kind of giving a bit of context first. So the obvious one being making money, and that also includes your term, so how long of a contract you sign. Sorry. Which is also tied into job security as well, right? This is a job, including no movement clauses, not modified no movement clauses, like the money, the financial side of things, right? And whether or not a team can actually make your contract work, right? Again, depends on the player, depends on what certain teams need, but money is the big thing, right? When you're a UFA, this might be your one time to cash in, right? So you got to make it count, right? And you can't fault guys for cashing in either, right? Like, they have an opportunity to essentially retire from work after your career's done. Now, I know a lot of guys don't flat out retire because, you don't want to be bored, right? But you can really set yourself up and your family up if you play your cards right when it comes to the financial side of things. So that is a huge, huge factor. Now, the next thing is, of course, being on a contending team, having an opportunity to contend for the Stanley Cup. That is very important for some players, right? It honestly really depends on what you want, but if you're a guy who's in demand, you're a UFA, those contending teams are definitely very attractive, especially if you've never won a Stanley Cup. You're going for that first Stanley Cup, or maybe you just want to keep winning. Totally get it. So yeah, no surprise, those teams in the this offseason, like Carolina, like Colorado, like Tampa Bay, if Tampa can make it work, that is. Those are the attractive teams for a lot of players, right? Playing close to home, that is something that is important to some players. I mentioned Johnny Gaudreau on this podcast before. By the way, making his return to Calgary this week, getting booed like crazy. I'm not surprised, but I still think it's so stupid. Like, come on. Like, Johnny Gaudreau, he doesn't owe you guys anything. Again, he's from the States. I think he's from New Jersey. Like, can you really fault him for wanting to go home? Like, listen, it's Calgary. Like, it's cold in the winter. It's far from his home. Like, you're honestly going to fault him for not staying in Canada? I mean, come on. Like, some people, like, comparing Calgary to, like, a nice place to live, like Florida, I'm probably going to get so many haters just for saying that. But that means people are listening to the podcast, so that's a W. Where is I going with that? Yeah, like, whatever. Fans of, like, Canadian markets, a lot of them just big whiners. I don't blame Gaudreau at all. It's too bad Columbus is terrible this year. I'm actually wearing my Columbus jersey right now. Because it's a great jersey. But, yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. But players, they want to play for the team they grew up cheering for. Totally get it, right? And I know some of you might be looking at that red flag section I have down there, and I have Toronto down there. I'll get to that. But, yeah, no. Players, they want to go back to where they grew up. That's why you see European players sometimes go back to Europe to wrap up their career, because that way they can play for the team that they grew up cheering for, whether that be in the Czech League or the KHL or whatever, right? Sweden, Finland, whatever. So, yeah, that's definitely a factor. And then, of course, there's the desirable places to live. Now, I didn't look into, like, state tax or anything like that for this video, but there are certain locations that players look at and think, hey, I want to live there, right? I have a family. I would like to live in that location. I want to raise my kids there. Maybe this is where I want to retire. And I've only got 3 teams up there on the slide, but there's totally other teams you could put up there, right? I got Anaheim, Tampa, and Florida, because those are the 3 I usually think of when I think of, like, the desirable places to live. And I know Anaheim sucks right now, and they're going through a rebuild, but in a few years, they will be back in that desirable place conversation, I think. And of course, you can put places like Arizona, great place to live. You can put Dallas in here. You could put Carolina in here. Raleigh, I've heard Raleigh's a really good city. And of course, it depends on what you want, right? Like, Connor Hellebuck was on 32 Thoughts this past week, and he's talking about how much he loves ice fishing. And that's one of the reasons why he loves living in Winnipeg. And a lot of people wouldn't want to live in Winnipeg, but if your hobbies are very popular in a certain location, like ice fishing in Winnipeg, and I've got a ton of family in Manitoba, so I've been ice fishing myself. It's not my thing, but I don't know, I could see myself ice fishing someday, maybe taking that up as a hobby. But I totally see where Connor Hellebuck's coming from, and that's something people think about, right? Like, if you enjoy water sports and stuff, you might want to live somewhere on a lake or whatever, right? So what is considered a desirable place to live really depends on the player, but that's something to consider. And then there's those hot spots, like, well, literal hot spots in the summer, but Anaheim, Toronto, or Tampa, not Toronto, and Florida. Those are the ones I go with. And then there's what I call the red flag markets, and you hear players and former players talk about this, how there's just places they won't go. And a lot of the times it has to do with the media, just kind of scrutiny you get when you mess up. the three teams I put up there: Toronto, Edmonton, Montreal. Those are the three that come to mind. You could totally put some other teams on that list too. Vancouver right now you could put on there. Maybe some of those bigger markets in the States like New York or Boston. It totally depends on who you ask, I say. But, if I was an NHL player and I had a choice of any team in the league to go to, I would be staying away from these three markets personally. And it's only because of just how overwhelming the media can be there, how overwhelming some of the fans can be. I get it. I don't mean to generalize, but it's no secret, really. And I'm still confident that Austin Matthews is going to leave Toronto at the end of his contract. And I think that is the sole reason for it. And just like Johnny Gaudreau, he's an American player. He has the right to go back to the States and play there if he wants, right? And then you can, of course, do the whole conspiracy theory thing that Arizona's timeline is lining up with Austin Matthews hitting the UFA, hitting unrestricted free agency. The conspiracy theories there. I'm totally in on it. I'm full tinfoil hat on that one, but it depends who you ask. Of course, those three teams, part of that could be returning home, like we saw with John Tavares, right? And I hear fans say, oh man, it would be so good to win there. Or, oh man, if you won a cup in Toronto, you'd be a celebrity, whatever. And it's okay, but first of all, no Canadian team has done anything lately to make me believe that any Canadian team's going to win anytime soon, really. I mean, the last time we saw the cup won by a Canadian team was 1993. I was a year old when that happened. I got nothing. I got no reason to believe that a cup's coming to Canada anytime soon. I'm not buying it, really. I would rather win a cup in Boston than win a cup in Toronto, personally. Probably need to get some haters for saying that, but hey, that means you're listening to the podcast, and I appreciate it. We need to get all the views we can on the algorithm here. So, anyways. So rather than me just going on that big rant like I did the last 10 minutes there, I want to go through an actual example of a player who's about to hit free agency. He's going to have quite a few choices on his hands on where he can go, most likely. I understand the salary cap is complicating things these days, but for this next little bit, I'm going to put myself in Bo Horvat's shoes, okay? I am Bo Horvat for the next 10, 20 minutes, however long this takes, okay? I am Bo Horvat. I am interviewing myself. Here we go. So if I am Bo Horvat, which I am, where do I go, right? Where do I go at unrestricted free agency? Okay, now let's just put the trade deadline aside here, okay? I'm not talking about where I think Bo Horvat's going to get traded to. I'm talking about where do I sign if I am Bo Horvat. And at first there were some things I didn't want to consider for this, like trying to make the money work and this and that, but I realized that I kind of need to go all out if I'm going to make this section work. So I did do a little bit of research in terms of which teams can make the salary cap work for potentially signing Bo Horvat. And I narrowed it down to 5 teams. And I did rank these. Okay, so these are the top 5 teams I think Bo Horvat could sign with in the offseason. Again, this has nothing to do with the trade deadline. I did not consider what teams he could get traded to and then re-sign with. This is just under the assumption, not the assumption, but let's pretend that he either gets traded somewhere and then doesn't re-sign, or that if he stays with the Canucks past the deadline and then his contract expires, which would be the most Canucks thing you could do, which is so funny. Could you imagine if they did that just like they did with JT Miller, except they re-signed Miller, but we'll see how that ages. Anyways, I'm not going to talk about JT Miller, but yeah, where does Bo Horvat sign? And please just disregard where he gets traded to. He has to get traded, right? Right? So, anyways, I got some honorable mentions. These are teams that I'll get into why, But these are 4 teams that just didn't quite make the cut when I'm kind of thinking about where Horvat could go. And of course, please consider the criteria I had in the last section of this podcast here, because that's what I'm going to be going back to for each of these. But Carolina, Carolina didn't quite make the cut because, they have a very good forward group. They have such a good team. And of course, they could welcome a guy like Bo Horvat. But first of all, where do you slot him in that lineup? You got to think he's going to be on the first 2 lines. And also, they have to re-sign Jordan Staal. And they have to decide if they want to re-sign him. I think they are. They really like him there. He's a very good player. He's a very good defensive player. And I just can't see Horvat signing there. He would be a good fit, but on top of trying to make the money work, I don't know. I don't know. They just make the cut. They just miss the cut, rather. Similar to New Jersey as well. New Jersey's got a good thing going there. And they mentioned this on 32 Thoughts, too, earlier this week, Jeff and Merrick. They were saying that with New Jersey, you got Hughes, you got Heischer down the middle. Horvat's not going to be on your third line. You don't want that. And do you really want to push one of those guys to the wing? I don't know, right? Like, center depth is important, but, and on top of that, they got some guys they still have to extend, and I think it'd just be tough to make that work. And I don't know if you really want to mess with this team too much, just because they've got some really good things going for them right now. I don't know if bringing in Bo Horvat would be the best idea. And let's say Horvat doesn't continue this production, then, a team that really doesn't want to be handcuffed is in a pretty tough position. So New Jersey just missed the cut. Now, I have Toronto on here, mainly because Bo Horvat, he's from Ontario. Now, he's from Rodney, Ontario, which I looked up on a map. I initially assumed that it was one of those places that are, like, pretty much Toronto. You know how there's, like, those cities like Mississauga that, people make it sound like it's not far from Toronto. It's like, oh, this isn't Toronto, but it's Toronto, right? It's just like Burnaby and Surrey and Vancouver. Like, it's all Vancouver, right? Richmond, it's Vancouver. Abbotsford, getting kind of close, sort of Vancouver, So I thought Rodney, Ontario is one of those kind of places, but it's not really. It's kind of halfway from Toronto to Detroit, so definitely closer to Detroit. And it's actually kind of close to Buffalo too, and that might get mentioned later. We'll see. So, I don't know if he was a Leafs fan growing up, but if he was, then I guess Toronto would make some sense. Toronto, it'd be tough to make the cap hit work. Obviously, Toronto's got guys they need to re-sign or replace. That's something I'm going to talk about later as well. And does Bo Horvat really want to go to that market, right? Vancouver's a pretty overwhelming market. Do you really want to go to Toronto and just take that to the next level? I don't think he does. So he might consider Toronto, but it's not happening. It's not. Even with the assumption that Austin Matthews is leaving. Yeah. I don't think Toronto's happening. And then I have Seattle up there because I actually don't have any Pacific teams on this list, mainly because of cap, because of market, and because of timeline, right? Bo Horvat's not going to Anaheim. That wouldn't make a ton of sense. And I have Seattle up there because, that could be fun, right? He kind of goes, kind of crosses the border there from Vancouver and kind of fuels a rivalry there. That'd be pretty sweet, but Seattle is kind of up there with the cap, I think, and they're going to have to re-sign Beniers soon, and it's kind of like New Jersey. Do you really want to mess with things? Things are going good right now. So, yeah, I don't think they can make Bo Horvat work, but that would be fun. So I wanted to include Seattle up here. Okay, number 5. Here's the 5th most likely team I think Bo Horvat can end up in this offseason. And I did want to have a Canadian team on this list, just because he's Canadian. I don't want to single out Canada like I have been so far this podcast. Like, I want to give Canada a bit of love, right? He's a Canadian kid. He might want to play in Canada someday. Or continue to play in Canada, rather. So I went with Winnipeg. I went with Winnipeg because, first of all, as Canadian markets go, it's a smaller one. The Winnipeg Jets, they love their fans and their fans love them, and I really like that. If I were to play in Canada personally as an NHLer, Winnipeg would probably be the one that I would look at. And it might be tough to work because they got to re-sign Dubois in the offseason, as well as Logan Stanley. And I think they have to find a new backup goalie as well, which won't be expensive, but, it's another thing. So they might have to make the cap work a little bit, but I don't think that would be impossible. Personally, I'd try to trade Dubois. I don't like him at all, but I digress. But I would totally replace Dubois with Horvat in a heartbeat. There's my boomer take for the podcast there, but yeah, I don't know. I think it'd be a good fit. He still gets to play in Canada without all the extra baggage. I think they can make the cap work. Yeah, it's not the most desirable location, but fans would absolutely love Bo Horvat. I can't even say his name anymore. The fans in Winnipeg would love Bo Horvat. He seems like the perfect player for that kind of market. Bring a bit more leadership into a team that was having some leadership issues in the offseason. Now, it really looks like Bonus really turned things around there in the dressing room, but bringing in a guy like Bo Horvat can make things even better. He doesn't need to be your team captain, but he's another good presence in that locker room. I think he'd be a good fit in Winnipeg. And also, I don't know if I would put them in contenders, but they're in the mix, right? These guys could go on a run this year. They could win the Stanley Cup. Who knows? I have no reason to believe that's going to change anytime soon with guys like Connor Hellebuck. So, I think Winnipeg would be a good fit. So that's my number 5 team. Number 4, I've got the Boston Bruins. Now, some people might expect this to be a bit higher on the list, but I will get into that. And the main things is being the cap. Like, they got to re-sign Pasternak. They have a lot of guys that are coming off the books, which seems like a good thing, and it is in a sense, but you have to replace all of those guys too, right? On top of all that, Jeremy Swayman's going to need a contract extension. I think Bergeron's going to stick around. I know there's always talks about him, like maybe he's done, but he's not. He's got at least another year easily. And then there's the big fish, David Pasternak, really. And signing a guy like Horvat might entice Pasternak to re-sign. Pasternak's going to re-sign anyways, but you want to put that supporting cast around him too. And a Bo Horvat would be perfect for that. Now, what complicates things is the cap. Like I just said, they might have to make a pretty big move to make this work. They might have to make some tough decisions that will affect the depth in their lineup, maybe their third and fourth line, or maybe things on the back end as well. It would be kind of tough to make this work, but it's a good market. It's a little bit closer to home, a little bit closer to Rodney, Ontario. More on that later. So that's good. I like Boston as a market. Yeah, there might be quite a bit of pressure there, kind of like you had in Vancouver, but I've been to Boston. I've been to a Red Sox game. They got very passionate fans there. They would love Bo Horvat. They really would. Bo Horvat's going to be a very popular player wherever he goes. And I think he'd be a great fit in Boston, but it would be tough to make that work. That's kind of why they're a bit lower on this list and not... I'm sure a lot of people have Boston like number 1 on their potential destinations for Bo Horvat. And in terms of like trade deadline stuff, I know I wasn't going to talk about this, but Boston's in that mix too, I would say. You bring Horvat in at the deadline. Pasternak sees the new shiny object that they maybe re-sign. Re-sign Horvat? Oh, cool. I should re-sign too, says David Pasternak. So, yeah, I don't know. I got him number 4. I understand why you might have him higher, but I think it'd be tough to make this work. But they could make it work. And if I'm Bo Horvat, I would like to go to Boston too. It's a great city, great market, really. You'd be a celebrity there, I think in a good way, not in like the Toronto kind of way. So Boston, number 4. Okay, number 3. Got Colorado Avalanche. Yeah, so another team that's probably on a lot of people's list, mainly because Colorado could use a bit more center depth, and Bo Horvat would be your number 2 center. There you go. You got McKinnon, you got Horvat. That looks fantastic. Yeah, they've successfully replaced Nazem Kadri this way. He would be a great fit roster-wise. But kind of like Boston, Colorado's got a lot of holes to fill in the offseason. They got a lot of guys coming off the books, which is a good thing, but you have to replace those guys. The McKinnon contract kicks in, which, his contract doubles, his cap hit doubles, really. So you got to make it work around that. Again, you got to fill those holes in your roster. Would Horvat get the same kind of money as he would somewhere else? Probably not. And the same can be said for Boston as well. I don't know if he would get the same kind of money as he would somewhere else. But he'd get a chance to win. And like Boston, those are 2 contending teams. Of course, Horvat would love to play in Colorado. Great location, great city. Not the smallest market, but I don't think you would get that kind of scrutiny there. So, pretty desirable place to live, I would say. Colorado's window is still very much open. Consider how young some of these guys are. So you think Colorado would be contending throughout Horvat's contract. So whatever he signs duration-wise. I don't know if he would get the same kind of term he would get somewhere else. But, if Horvat's like full-blown cup mode, then yeah, Colorado, that's the team, I would say. But I got number 3 because I have 2 more teams that I think might be a bit more likely, and I will defend myself when I get there. But I don't know. We'll just get to it now. But yeah, Colorado, number 3. Totally understand why you might have them a bit higher. But I've got 2 teams that I think would be a bit more appealing to Bo Horvat. The number 2 team on my list of where Bo Horvat might end up this offseason is, I've got the Detroit Red Wings. Okay. And, this might be a bit of a surprise, but I will defend myself. I've got some pretty good reasons of why I think he might consider signing in Detroit. So the first thing is, let's get the obvious one out of the way here. So Dylan Larkin. Okay, so a lot of people, they'll say, why sign Bo Horvat when you already have Dylan Larkin? You already have your number 1 setter. There's a few reasons. First of all, he's a pretty good number 2 center, right? Or you put Larkin on the second line or whatever, right? Why not sign them both, really? Steve Yzerman, he'll make it work. Try to dump a contract somewhere, maybe throw in a draft pick. I don't know, but this is a team that wants to turn the corner. They're ready, I think. You got to push a team out of the Atlantic, obviously, or really, really push for the wild card. But I think if you're Stevie Y, you try to make it both work, really. I don't think there's a reason why you can't make Horvat and Larkin work, really. Maybe put them on the same line. I don't know. I don't think that's a good idea, but, 1A, 1B center, I don't know. But I think in terms of the roster, you can make it work. You might need to move some pieces around, but yeah. The next reason is it's very close to home. When you look at Rodney, Ontario, where Bo Horvat grew up, pretty close to Detroit. And for all I know, he might have been a Detroit fan growing up. I don't know. I didn't do that much of a deep dive into this, but very close to home. Original 6 market. Don't think you would get the same kind of scrutiny as you would get in a bigger market. I don't know how much money he would make as well. Wait till I get to my number 1 pick here, though. I'll get to that. And Stevie Y, he might give him a pretty firm option and then maybe not much wiggle room. And maybe that's why Larkin hasn't signed yet. It's because maybe Stevie Y is playing hardball with him in terms of the contract. So that could have something to do with it. But either way, if I'm Stevie Y, you re-sign Larkin and you try to make Horvat work. I think that would be a great idea. And again, hometown kid, sort of. Pretty close to Detroit. Fans would love him. Fans would love Stevie Y if he made this work, personally. And then you have a team that's a playoff team, right? You got to think that's a playoff team. I know the East is tight, but this could be the guy who pushes Detroit, over the edge there. Sider's developing pretty well. Lucas Raymond's developing pretty well. Husso's been great in net. Got a good roster there. Let Bertuzzi walk. He's a bit of a liability anyways. He just gets hurt all the time. Off ice stuff, let Bertuzzi go. I think he's going to go anyways, regardless of if they sign Horvat or not. But let Bertuzzi go. Bring in Horvat. You got a fan favorite now. This is the guy Detroit needs. I think Detroit should be making a push for Horvat. And if they can't make something work with Larkin, then you definitely look at bringing in Horvat. That is exactly what you need to do if you're Detroit. However, I have one team that I've got one more team. This is the number one team. A lot of the same reasons as Detroit, but with cap flexibility, and that is the Buffalo Sabres. This might be a bit of a surprise, but hear me out. So first of all, Buffalo has a lot of big contracts coming off the books. They've got a lot of cap space to work with. They can give Horvat money and term. And you might be a bit like, oh, well, you don't want to make that same mistake as you did with Skinner. That's a good point. But if you're Horvat, who cares? Cash in. Buffalo would be the team. Like Detroit, they are turning the corner. I actually have a bit more confidence in Buffalo than I do Detroit. And that's aside from looking at the standings. I'm talking about next season. So let's assume Detroit doesn't make the playoffs and maybe Buffalo doesn't make the playoffs. Bo Horvat can be what gets this team into the playoffs. You have another big offensive piece to already add to a pretty good young offense. A very, very good offense in Buffalo. And yeah, Buffalo's priorities maybe should be towards adding someone on the back end or adding another goalie. But I think Bo Horvat would be very, very beneficial for this team. They could probably use a bit more leadership for all I know. I mean, bringing in essentially a veteran to help these young guys on top of already having veterans like Alex Tuck, right? I think he'd be a good fit there. He would get paid, so very important. Also, proximity to home. Buffalo's right there too, right? I mean, if you look at where Rodney, Ontario is, it's kind of halfway to Detroit, halfway to Toronto, halfway to Buffalo. Very, very close to home. So it's a good fit in that sense too. Got a bit of a quieter market. This is a player that fans could really get around. They've got very, very passionate fans in Buffalo, but they haven't been going to games. Not whenever I see a Buffalo home game, it's a little more empty than I would like it to be. But at the same time, I can't fault Buffalo fans because they have not had a lot to cheer about. This could be the player that gets this team back into the playoffs. And Buffalo's my number one destination. Seriously, if I'm Bo Horvat, I'm looking at Buffalo because this is a team. They're on the brink of making the playoffs here. Just a lot to be excited about. And he'll get paid. And that's important. This is going to be Horvat's only chance to cash in, probably. Make it count. Seriously. Buffalo's on the upswing. If this team gets in the playoffs, that market is going to be insane. They're going to be full-blown on board with this team. They've got great jerseys. I don't know if that matters, but yeah. I guess the only thing, maybe not the most desirable location, but again, it's close to home. If that's something he wants to do, then I say go for it. And assuming they don't re-sign Opozo, I don't think they're gonna. The captaincy is available then. You think it would go to a guy like Dowling or Thompson, but if they want to take a different route, you have a guy who's been the captain for a long time. At least give him an A. Or who cares, really? He's another leadership guy. Another leader. That's the word I'm looking for. He's another leader in that dressing room. I say do it. So my number one off-season destination for Bo Horvat. If I am Bo Horvat, which I am for this episode of the podcast, and maybe beyond, we'll see. I might change my name, might change my identity. We'll see. But if I'm Bo Horvat, which I am, I'm signing in Buffalo. Okay, fantasy pick. So this week in fantasy, I'm just saying, I might be playing one of my listeners of this podcast. I might be playing him this coming week. And you know what? I gotta make some serious moves if I'm playing this particular listener of the podcast in fantasy. He's number one in the league. He's probably gonna be number one after this week as well, the one that's just wrapping up. I need to make some big moves here, okay? And I need to make some big suggestions. So for this upcoming week, and I really hope all listeners of this podcast really consider this pick, I'm going with Etu Makiniemi of the San Jose Sharks. Okay, hear me out. I'm very confident that early this week, both James Reimer and Kaapo Kähkönen are on the move. Okay, I'm very confident of that. I don't have sources. This is entirely gut instinct. Okay, but if that happens, this is your guy. Okay, Etu Makiniemi, number 3 goalie right now for the Sharks, but he's going to be number 1. I'm very confident of that. Reimer's going to be gone. Kaapo Kähkönen, they're both going to be gone. And then this is your guy, okay? Now, I know San Jose's not a good team, but he's going to get starts. He's going to get a ton of starts. I know he's only got 2 this season, but trust me, this is a guy you want to pick up. You want to pick him up early because people are going to be all over this guy. So you're really going to want to pick him up soon. Seriously. Maybe even like today before the week starts. Seriously, get ahead of the curve here. I know he's only got 2 starts, but he has not lost in regulation yet this season. Okay? And he was very, very good in his most recent start. And if fantasy hockey has taught me anything, you need to look at their last game played and judge their entire rest of the season on that one game. That's what fantasy hockey's taught me, is overreacting. Overreacting works in fantasy hockey. So when you see that 958 in his game against Anaheim, I know Anaheim's not that good, but maybe a bit underrated. I'm just going to say. And if you go off that most recent performance, he's been lights out, right? This could be a Vezina. He could be in the Vezina conversation by the end of the year. Seriously, he's going to go on a run. The Sharks are totally going to totally ruin their chances in the Bedard sweepstakes when they bring this guy up, because he's going to be that good. And I know his numbers in the Barracuda haven't been great, 902, but I mean, look at his numbers. He's better at the NHL level. Okay, he's got a 906. That's going to come way up. Okay, he's going to hit a hot streak. This is your guy. So if you are a listener of this podcast, pick him up now. Seriously, he is the number 1 fantasy pick for the week. This has nothing to do with who I'm playing this upcoming week. This is your guy, Etu Makiniemi. He's the future of the Sharks. He's going to take the Sharks to the promised land. I'm very confident of that. And that's it for episode 9 of the podcast, our 3 subscriber special, even though it's more like 2, but whatever. They don't ask how. They ask how many subscribers you have. Trying to get to 10 subscribers by the end of the year, the end of 2023. We have about 11 months left to reach that goal. So if you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to the podcast. Be sure to leave a like as well. Definitely appreciate all my listeners. I'm very appreciative of my guys too. Seriously, so happy playing with you guys this past week. Really looking forward to making some more games in the city down the stretch here. And hopefully a new episode tomorrow as well. Might start spacing these out a bit more because I really do enjoy doing this podcast. I've got just so many ideas here for podcasts, and I really hope you enjoyed our little UFA special here, I guess. And new episode tomorrow. See you then.